Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our In Dialogue session this month. We are going to talk about a really important topic, which is picky eaters. And especially leading up to the Thanksgiving holidays, we definitely want to make sure that we're helping you both to understand some of the behaviors that you may see from your children, and also help it to be an easier holiday for your whole family. So today we have Rebecca Connick and Nicole Bryson that are here from Ripple Child Development. These are our friends that have joined us before as well. And so we're really happy today to be able to talk with you about identifying some of the behaviors that go into picky eating and also knowing how to support those eaters. We certainly don't want it to be a situation where picky eating becomes a bad thing, because we know that there's other behaviors that are associated with that as well. So tell us a little bit about kind of the undercurrent of picky eating.
Sure. So when we think about picky eating, it's a very common stage for kids to go through. That doesn't mean it's necessarily normal or developmentally ideal, I guess is the right word. Many kids go through it though. And so signs of a kid that might be a little bit more picky is if they refuse food at the table, if they avoid food that you give them for a meal, if they maybe have an emotional response or a tantrum in response to food. And something that we like to highlight too is that oftentimes kids have these responses because they are having some kind of difficulty with the food. It's not always behavioral. Sometimes it is a legitimate challenge.
Textural, yes.
Either from the sensory perspective or from the motor perspective of eating. And so we see a lot that picky eating is often a result of an underlying challenge.
And I think something important to identify is that the picky eating isn't all related to the child's behavior. It can be that mealtimes feel really stressful for you as a parent.
Yes.
That you are dreading when it's mealtime, that you're cooking multiple meals at every meal. You're a short order cook. That's a lot of work and a lot of stress, and can take you away from other things that you would like to be doing in your home or with your kids. So not only are there behaviors from a child that can indicate picky eating, but also the emotional stress for a parent.
The whole environment
Exactly.
of mealtime.
Exactly.
Yes. And how, I've spoken with parents before, and they will say things like, oh, well, they're just being difficult. So how do you balance that idea of a child coming into their independence with this idea that there may be some very real textural or emotional kinds of things that are associated with that?
Our goal is to always get to the why behind a behavior, with any behavior, whether it's related to feeding or not related to feeding. And when it comes to feeding, there are so many layers that it can take some time to figure out the why. As therapists that work in the realm of feeding, we are going deep all the way back to those early feeding skills to find out, like, okay, did this baby breastfeed? Did we have difficulty latching? Were there signs of reflux going on? Because all of that will have a trickle down effect to their later feeding skills. We're also looking at, what are they eating now? What textures are they enjoying? What textures are they avoiding? Are there certain food groups that are being avoided altogether? And then the very first place that we always start after we kind of figure out the why is we want to look at the feeding environment. How are we eating as a family? How is this child being fed? What are they sitting in?
Yes.
What table are they sitting at? All of that has a big impact on a child's ability to stay engaged at a mealtime, to attend to the mealtime, to stay regulated at the mealtime, and to be open to exploring new foods.
And a lot of those things are environmental situations that are going to be completely different at family holiday time too.
Absolutely.
So it just adds another layer of anxiety
Yes.
For that as well, both for the parent and for the child.
Yes.
So how might a parent navigate some of that in a situation that is going to be a little bit different from what the child is typically
We
available?
always like to share how a situation is going to be different and what that looks like for the child. So I think a lot of times we assume that kids remember about the holiday routine or would just know what to expect if we're going to a relative's house or grandma's house or somewhere different. But one of the best things we can do is kind of talk that through and what that looks like first. Hey, we're going to go to grandma's house. Grandma's house is a little bit different. We might sit at a big table. We might have to look at different foods. There's going to be new foods there. You might not have seen turkey before. Let's look up pictures of what turkey looks like, and kind of having those conversations about what they can expect. And then also having appropriate expectations for what that
That's
might
huge.
look like.
Yes.
I think a really big frustrating thing can be when you have really, really high expectations, and when we know that holidays can be overwhelming for kids. It might mean a skipped nap. It might mean more tired. It might mean that they're more hungry or less hungry. Everything is different about a holiday environment sometimes. And so having expectations that reflect that it is a harder environment, it is something different, it is something new for kids to navigate year to year, because it's not something we practice all year round necessarily.
Right.
But having ways that you communicate these differences to your kiddos, preparing them for it, preparing if you have any expectations for them, and then also having realistic expectations about what that might actually look like.
Yeah, and I think thinking about what your goal is for the day helps to set those expectations. So I know for myself, going into Thanksgiving, my goal is to spend time with my family and to have an enjoyable experience. There are already going to be so many roadblocks that pop up throughout the day because we're in this highly stimulating environment where expectations might be a little bit different. You're usually not in your own home. And so I know that going into it, I don't have high expectations for what my kids will eat. I'm going to feed them like a really good, hearty breakfast to make sure that they have a full belly. And I may bring some of their preferred foods with us if I feel like that's going to make things go a little bit easier. But if they just eat bread and cheese and like some snacks, I'm okay with it because it's one day.
Right. And also, I think it's important for parents to understand too that that is not a reflection on their parenting at all. That it's a difficult situation. And there are things as adults that we don't like to eat.
Exactly.
And no one seems to cast aspersions on that.
Right.
Whereas with children, exactly what you're saying, there's some very high expectations. So if you feel that your child is exhibiting some of these behaviors, where do you go from there? How do you assess what is something that needs a little bit more intervention and what is something that just needs to be allowed to play out developmentally?
I think the first step can always be talking to your pediatrician about your concerns. If you have concerns about feeding, requesting an evaluation with a feeding therapist, there is no harm in that. And as feeding therapists that have evaluated many kids, we're happy to have a kid come in that doesn't really need the full throttle feeding therapy, right? Maybe sometimes they just need a little bit of a home program, or there are times where we say, hey, I think you need to go this other avenue and we need to change some things in the home. But requesting that feeding evaluation with an occupational therapist or speech therapist that is trained in feeding therapy is incredibly valuable.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the elements that might lead to a picky eater. Like you alluded to at the start, sometimes it's a textural thing, sometimes it's just a preference, but there are some other causes that go into that as well.
Well, eating is one of the only activities that requires your full sensory system. You are using your motor system to sit up posturally at the table. You are using your touch, your taste, your smell. You're using everything. And I think for a child who might have some sensory differences or that eating is hard for them, there's often a sensory component that could be tricky for them. And what kids do when something is challenging or tricky is they try to avoid it or refuse it. And so what that might look like is like if they don't like their hands to be messy, if they're kind of constantly wiping or don't want to touch a food, that will impact eating because often we touch food to bring to our mouth, or we might have something on our hands when we eat. So that's kind of one sensory indicator. It could be also that once the food gets to the mouth, that's something about that texture is really overwhelming to the child. You might see gagging, you might see spitting out, you might see some things like that. And then there's also just the fact that looking at food can be overwhelming for some kids. Like that looks different. That is a shape or a color or a texture, it's wet, that's something that I'm not familiar with. And so a lot of times toddlers have a response, and it's biological, to be weary of something that's new because they don't know, is that safe for my body, is that not? And so it can just be the fact that like that looks different. And so from a sensory perspective, those are some things that you might see. I'll let Nicole talk a little bit about from a motor perspective, because I think they're so hand in hand, and sometimes it's really hard to tease out if it's a sensory response or a motor challenge. But all in all, we usually see kids with both.
Yeah. And often at the holidays, there are things that they may eat individually that are all conglomerated into dishes, and that
It looks overwhelming.
Right. Jello and nuts and marshmallows are great separate. But when you put it all together, I don't know about that.
Right, exactly. And that is really normal for kids to like a food separately, but then when you put it all together, it does taste different. It doesn't maintain its integrity in texture, shape, or flavor a lot of times when we mix food together. And so mixed textures are one of the things that are more challenging. From a motor perspective, there are a lot of things that can be happening, and it can be hard to differentiate if it's sensory or motor, but things that I look for are excessive gagging, choking, obviously, spitting food out because we're unable to manage it. I'm also looking at, are we chewing on both sides of our mouth? What does our swallow pattern look like? Are we chewing in the front of our mouth? The front of our mouth is not made for chewing. These teeth are made for tearing, and we're supposed to move our food to our back molars to chew. And so sometimes kids are not able to move food to their back molars because their tongue range of motion is not where it should be, or strength. And so then they're limiting themselves a lot of times on meat, because we really need our molars to break down meat. So I'm really looking at, what does their chewing pattern look like? What does their swallowing pattern look like? I'm really asking a lot of questions about their food preferences. And then we ask a lot of questions about their behavior around food, because that lets us know the sensory piece as well.
Are there ways that parents can help sort of build up to not necessarily a tolerance, but are there foods that can be introduced earlier that will kind of help mitigate some of those issues that you might see?
One of the best ways that we know to help a child become comfortable with food is to eat together as a family. And the reason is that if there's a food that's new or different, and if they see that that food is also on their parent's plate, and if their parent is seen enjoying it and eating it, they get to watch what their parent's mouth does when they eat that food. They build trust that like, okay, my mom's eating that, so that must be safe and delicious. I might think about trying that because I'm in this environment where we're all sharing the same food. That's something that's really powerful, especially for kids that tend to be a little more cautious about food. And I think, you know, we're busy these days. It's really hard to all sit around to eat. Like sometimes we have some kids in extracurriculars. Sometimes we have some kids that we feed at different times, and parents are coming home from work and eating something different later. And all of that is totally okay because we want to work within what your family routine is. But just thinking about like, has my child seen me eat this food? Or like, have they had an experience that's been positive and not stressful having this food at the table? That could be really big.
And it's never too early to start family meal times. We really recommend starting it as soon as you start introducing solids, which we're looking for 6 months and sitting up without support. That's our milestone for starting solids. But you really want to start eating as a family as soon as possible. It's obviously never too late either. But we want our kids to see the mealtime routine. We want them to understand the mealtime routine. We want them to have the whole sensory experience of a food. And a lot of times that's watching their parents eat that food.
And over time, like I wouldn't necessarily expect, okay, the first time this food is on the child's plate and they see their parents eat it, okay, they'll eat it. It might take time. Like it's taken years sometimes for kids to get comfortable and confident with a food's texture or whatever, for whatever reason, if it's a little more challenging. And so we also try to tell parents not to give up. You know, if the kid says, I'm not interested in that or doesn't eat that, it can feel hard from a food waste perspective to keep giving them opportunities. But if it's just a very small amount, a very small portion of a new food, that exposure is going to help them feel more confident and comfortable trying that food. There's research to show that it takes at least 20 exposures of a new food sometimes for kids for them to feel safe with that food. And so I think over time, it's the long game. You know, we want to think about the long game of providing them opportunity and exposure in a very comfortable, shared meal kind of way.
Right.
That will help kids feel more confident trying new things.
And I think also giving children the permission to, you don't have to like this as much as I do.
Right.
This one time, and our storyteller, Ms. Sherilyn, has written a book actually about the Hello Bite, and this idea that you just take a bite, and if you like it, there is a lot more for you to have. But if you don't like it, we'll try to say hello at another time.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
And something
Yeah.
you're kind of alluding to in the way that you say that is not pressuring. Because a
Yeah.
lot of times I think picky eaters feel a lot of pressure
Yes.
to try new things, and a lot of pressure when there's a new food. Stress and pressure leads to like higher hormonal levels in that kiddo, and it turns off appetite. And so that's like a huge thing too, is that if you have that air of like, yeah, we're just eating a family meal together.
Right.
And
We're
there's
talking
no
about our day.
Yeah, there's no pressure or stress. That is going to be huge, because stress and pressure do turn off the body's appetite.
So what about the old school idea of the clean plate club?
We don't love it.
We don't. So the Clean Plate Club, or the Happy Plate, as some people like to call it, it just promotes cleaning your plate to please the others around you. It's showing kids that external forces or extrinsic motivation is the goal in the situation. We want to teach them to listen to their hunger cues, to listen to their satiation cues, to learn to listen to their body for what feels good for them. We very much believe in the division of responsibility when it comes to eating. And if you haven't heard of it before, the division of responsibility means that it is the caregiver's responsibility to choose what the meal is and to choose what to serve to their child, and it is the child's responsibility to choose what and how much they will eat of what has been served to them. The most important factor in our children eating or promoting exploration is not a specific food, it's the environment.
Absolutely. So if you have a child who is demonstrating some of these things, and from a parent perspective is very difficult to cook for this child.
Yeah.
Where do you go from there? Do you always feel like you have to have something as a backup? Or as a parent, what is the next step if you have a child navigating that?
I think one of the best things you can do is always have a safe food presented to them. So like always a familiar, well-loved, tolerated food on their plate. And if you have something else that you're introducing or something else that is less tolerated, when there is that safe food there, eating begets eating. So if they like start to eat that food that they're comfortable and confident with, and then also see some other food on their plate, you kind of got them started with eating that safe food. And so then moving to another food, they might have the capacity to do that. I think sometimes when introducing meals, it can be really easy to just be like, well, I'm gonna try this new meal and see how they do, or if they like it. And that can be really overwhelming. And if there's nothing on that plate that they're interested in, it's harder for eating to start.
And then if they know that their parents might offer another food after, it creates a lot of lack of clarity around the mealtime routine. It creates a lack of clarity around what the expectations and boundaries are. They don't feel motivated because they know if they just wait it out, they're gonna get something else later.
So we would rather, if you're planning on having another food for them, we would rather that be introduced on that first plate. Like, okay, this is their safe food. Instead of cooking it later or after what I try, I'm just gonna include it on their plate with a little bit of the new food. And that is usually how we like to set up a meal.
And I think I've spoken to parents who had very young children, and I think often we'll give them baby versions or toddler versions of food. And ultimately, we recognize that those are not tasty. We would not choose to do those at all. So I think understanding some of that as well, that, as you said, the sensory elements of it are a big part of it. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, there's this concept on salad starts that they hashtag same. So like same meal that the parents have, you can adapt for your kids. And adapt means like maybe you can keep the ingredients separate, maybe you can cut it differently, maybe you can include, if you're having a big mixed salad, maybe you can include some of their favorite kind of ingredients on the side or something like that. So there's ways to adapt a food while keeping it same, that your family is kind of eating and enjoying.
Yeah, a lot of the food that is deemed to be kid food or baby food is a lot of marketing. And parents, unfortunately, are so vulnerable when it comes to marketing. We're an easy target. We are wanting to do what's best for our kids, but also we live really busy lives. And so anything we can do that's going to make things a little bit easier seems like an easy yes for us. But a lot of times, keeping things more simple and feeding them what we are already eating is going to be the most beneficial thing.
So if you have a child and you've already assessed, that your environment is relaxed, that physically, they're in a comfortable place, you have figured out that they're not, you're not giving them extra snacks during the course of the afternoon, and you realize that there may be something more to it. What are some of those physical elements that could be a little bit more extreme in that kind of situation? What are some of the things that go beyond just sort of personal preference for a child?
Oh, like if they're having a struggle?
Yes. What kind of physical elements might be a part of that?
Yeah, we might look at the structure of the mouth. We might look if there's any tethered oral tissue, which is, tongue tie, lip tie, cheek ties. We might look for sensory processing differences. We might look for developmental delays and things that would all impact a child's abilities to successfully eat.
And some of those things that we're looking for physically are excessive gagging, vomiting, very large tantrums around meal times, and a lot of rigidity around what we will eat.
Gotcha.
Being brand specific, or only crunchy, like a sensory specificity, like they only eat crunchy or they only eat soft.
I only eat this type of chicken tender. I won't eat it at every restaurant.
Right, that kind of thing.
So what are some ways that you can take all of these things into consideration in the midst of kind of your busy life as well?
Yeah, it could be challenging.
I think the first step is establishing a home family mealtime routine, because then you have a baseline that you can come back to after the holidays or after that crazy Thanksgiving meal. You want some sort of easy routine that is consistent for your family and is easy for you to hold boundaries in, is easy for you to maintain, and then you can kind of have that as your baseline that you go back to.
Right. Well, and family meal times are so important for communication and a sense of belonging as well. So that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and in New Orleans, like eating is such
it's such a part of our culture.
Yes.
It's such a social activity.
Yes. Well, so for parents that are navigating this, what's kind of the big idea that we want parents to understand?
I kind of want to validate parents. Like it could be really challenging when you have a picky eater, and a lot of times in the parents that we work with through our program or something we want them to know is that if you are stressed as a parent, that's enough to get help. Like that is enough to seek out therapy. That is enough to seek out maybe therapy for your child versus support and education for yourself as a parent. We don't need to look for certain really, severe issues. Like if you are stressed at meal times, that is enough to look for support.
That's great. All right. Anything else that we've missed about picky eaters? I want to make sure that we're sharing all of the information with families, but
I don't think so. Just know that we are always available to answer questions.
Great.
We are, as two therapists, an OT and a speech language pathologist, we are feeding therapists. We have worked in this for a really long time together. And
with infants all the way through teenagers.
Wonderful.
And we love guiding families and knowing okay, what's my next step? Here's my situation, what's the best step? And we, will really direct families to where we think, based on our experience, a good first step is. There's considerations for every family, and we like to hear about what your family is experiencing in order to guide you, whether that might be early steps. That's a really supportive program. That it might be like a clinic with a feeding therapist. It might be just some education for how to promote eating at home. And we would be really happy to help families navigate that.
That's terrific. Any kind of resources that are available to parents, I think are great to have in your back pocket. So,
Absolutely.
yes. Well, thank you guys so much, the two of you.
Thank you for
that's
having
some really
us.
great information, and I know sometimes that's a topic that's really stressful for parents.
Yes.
Maybe even more so than the children
I
themselves.
think so.
So I hope we helped sort of demystify a lot of that for y'all. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're interested in more information, we'll have Nicole and Rebecca's information following. And please feel free to reach out to them. You can also feel free to reach out to us here at the Children's Museum, and we'd be glad to connect you with resources that can help you with that. But thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next month.
Thanks. Thank you.